Oh my goodness. Here we are in our second month, which is February, or day 32 if you are following along on the day. So we are on February 1 or day 32 of 365 days in walking through the Bible alphabetically. We just finished Acts, Amos, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And now we are on Colossians. Today's devotion is called 8 Truths in One Simple Prayer. So you are going to read the morning rinse. It's pretty short, and it's Colossians 1 and 2. Come back and let's start this devotion for day 32. So the featured verses are Colossians 1, 9 through 12. For this reason also, since the day we heard it, we have not ceased to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that you will walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please him in all aspects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for the attaining of all steadfastness and patience, joyously giving thanks to the Father, who has qualified us to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. Woo, that was a lot in one little section, just a few verses. There was so much richness in that. The really cool thing about this is, just like our very, very first morning rinse, it began with a challenge to be devoted to prayer. And so we started January that way. And just like January, it is amazing how the Word of God is life, because Colossians is also starting off with prayer. We are starting another month founded on prayer. So Paul, the author of the book of Colossians, he wrote this letter to the church of Colossae from prison. He was in Rome at the time, and he was in prison. We talked about this in the book of Acts, where Paul was in prison, and I have a feeling that at some point he just acknowledged that this was his path. He would get arrested for preaching the word of God and going against kind of the grain, and so it was another hard place. He was in prison, and yet, just like the devotion when he was in prison in that inner chamber and all he did was praise, he wrote a power-packed prayer that actually can be applicable to our lives at any point, at any time. We all endure challenging situations. All of us do. And every challenging situation can be different on different levels. Some people endure challenging situations that are so deep and so stressful, and then other people's challenges are equally as hard for them, but just in a different light. I mean, maybe they've got a relative or someone in their family that has went to prison or is addicted to drugs or some other really, really challenging thing, or someone maybe grew up with no parent. Everyone has some kind of challenging situation, and we cannot compare our challenging situation to others and think that ours is better than or worse than someone else's. He was dealing with a lot, Paul was. But he was not only dealing with being bound, he was having to combat false teachers outside of the prison walls. So he was not only living with the challenges whenever he was in prison, but whenever he was released from prison, he was dealing with another set of challenges with false teachers and all of the accusations. Whatever situation he was in, it seemed like there was a challenge for him to overcome. And in today's featured verse, he begins his opening greeting in this letter. He started out with a very powerful and yet very simple prayer. And I say powerful because in this prayer, there are 8 golden nuggets to ask God for, that these 8 things will completely revolutionize and enrich our lives and help us grow closer to him in our walk. First one is in verse 9. It says, help us to know his will for our lives. In that verse, it's for this reason also, since the day we heard it, We have not ceased to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that you may walk in the manner worthy of the Lord, which is the second thing. Help us to walk worthy to please him. So number 1, help us to know his will for our lives. Number 2, help us to walk worthy to please him. Number 3, help us to have spiritual understanding. So we have help us to know his will for our lives, help us to walk worthy to please him, help us to have spiritual understanding, help us to be fruitful in everything we do, help us to have more knowledge of him, help us to have joy, help us to have power and strength, and help us to always be thankful. I'm going to read the featured verse again to you. For this reason also, since the day we heard it, we have not ceased to pray for you and to ask that you may be filled with the knowledge of his will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so that you will walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for the attaining of all steadfastness and patience, joyously giving thanks to the Father, who has glorified us to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. So did you hear all 8 of those things? Is all of that attainable? I mean, I believe it is. Honestly, if we were to live them out, it can change the dynamics of how we walk in our daily lives and how we respond to life's challenges. So my challenge for you today, I challenge you to take these verses. I am challenging you to memorize these verses, whatever translation that you like. Another thing I would like for you to do, not just memorize it, but to list the 8 things out, put it on a sticky note and put it on your mirror in your bathroom. So I want you to memorize those verses, however is easiest for you. And then tonight, when you reflect on it, when you pull out your journal, after you have memorized these verses, and if you're doing this with a friend, if you have some accountability partners with this, say the verses to your friends or whomever you're doing this with. But in your reflection, when you're pulling out your journal, say this prayer one more time and really think about the words in it. And as you memorize it during the day, write down how it made you feel. And if there was a specific example of maybe you are going through a challenging situation right now, write that challenging situation in your journal and write down how this prayer helped you overcome some things or helped you get a breakthrough in how you view that thing. Sometimes we just need a new perspective of our situations. And once we get that new perspective, we realize, you know what? Life is pretty good. Even though sometimes I might think that it's challenging, it's actually pretty good. That is my challenge to you today. So memorize these verses, write them, wherever, these 8 things on your mirror or, your kitchen cabinet or wherever, and then write down how they made you feel. I hope that this devotion today in Colossians was really inspiring to you, and I truly hope that you are gleaning from this and understanding the power of prayer as we start this second month. If you do not have your printed copy of Rinse, Reflect, Repeat, you can go to the show notes, or you can go to AnitaCordell.com and order it, as well as you can order the companion journal and be able to document your reflections all year long. And until tomorrow, keep rinsing, reflecting, and repeating. God bless you.